Hi, everybody. Welcome back to LaraChat Live. We're on episode number 18 in a brand new year, 2017. We've got our Laravel founder, Taylor Otwell, as our main guest tonight. Thank you, Taylor, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And we've got our usual cast, myself, Sean. We've got Matt, Eric, and Alfred, the usual gang of misfits here. So what we wanted to do on this show, do a little bit of a Q&A, find out what's going on with Taylor, Laravel, and we wanted to get in kind of a roundtable discussion about how we stay up to date with code, technology, and how we improve ourselves as developers. Normally we get into like a news segment. I usually pass that off to Riz, but he's not available today, and I don't really want to get into the news. I would rather get into the questions right away. So first and foremost, the first question that I would like to ask Taylor is, Taylor, do you have any resources that you'd like to see or follow that to learn new technology or to see what people are writing about that's popular or interesting? So I'd like to ask that to Taylor first, but I'd also like to hear what the other guys do as well.
Yeah, so typically it feels like I go to Reddit /r/Laravel or /r/PHP and other like web development subreddits, Hacker News. And then it was kind of funny, just a couple of days ago, I actually logged into Medium for kind of the first time really as like to try to follow people, and I was like, oh, this is kind of nice because I could follow like the Laravel tag and a few other developers and stuff and see whatever they're blogging about. And then like later that afternoon they released this statement that like they're having trouble and laying off 50 people and all this. So it's like, okay, well, that's great. But yeah, mainly just that stuff. Of course, I see I'm on Twitter, I see what people are tweeting there, what they're talking about, if they mention me and stuff. But it seems like mainly Reddit for links and tutorials and stuff.
Did that exclusively for like Laravel content, or how do you like? I guess I'm also curious about is you, if I understand correctly, you take a lot of inspiration from .NET and Ruby in terms of how some code is structured in Laravel.
Yeah.
How do you keep up on that kind of technology or learn new things for what's coming next in Laravel?
So for that kind of stuff, I usually read the release notes for other frameworks and tools and stuff. Like if there's a new version of .NET MVC, I'll usually go look at their release notes and see what new features they have, or same way with Rails. And lately I've looked at Phoenix some in Elixir to see kind of what they have going on, especially since Elixir Phoenix is one of the other frameworks that sort of has a real-time focus, especially with event broadcasting in Laravel. That was something I was looking at and kind of seeing how it looked on their end. And same way with Action Cable and Rails. So yeah, I read those release notes and stuff, but that's about it. I mean, lately I've been pretty busy actually, and haven't been digging into a lot of that stuff.
Do you do any podcasts or anything?
No, I don't really listen to podcasts. The only one I've listened to recently was Adam Wathan's Full Stack Radio. I listen to that sometimes, but even that is pretty hit and miss. Usually in my free time or whatever, I would watch like Netflix or something. I don't do like anything programming related really.
Yeah. Black Mirror.
I do want to mention about Adam Wathan's last podcast with West Boss and how he had to re-record his voice. I thought that was pretty amazing.
I told him not to. I told him that was a waste of time, but he wouldn't listen to me.
Yeah, I can't imagine sitting there just trying to repeat this particular conversation, and yeah, it's not good. It wouldn't go anywhere. Props to Adam for doing that, though. And another thing, I on the Twitter front, I noticed there was a whole, I guess to kick off 2017, it might be a touchy subject, but there's this whole Twitter flame war about how Laravel promotes bad practices from certain people. I'm curious, like, so to give you some background, where I work, we use Laravel, but there's certain people who don't want to use Laravel. So I have to have arguments / discussion / yelling, etc., with them on why we should do this or bad practices, facades, etc. So I'm curious, as it's a personal thing to you because you are the founder and you have people who are personally attacking you. How do you handle that?
Sometimes better than others. I mean, it depends what kind of day I'm having. If I'm feeling pretty feisty, sometimes I come down hard on them. If I'm not really feeling that way, sometimes I just ignore it. But I don't really care if people think that Laravel or they don't like Laravel or whatever. I just want them, if they say something's a bad practice, I just feel like they should prove it more than just like say it on Twitter. So like that's why I try to drive people to the code, really, like just ask them to name me a concrete example of something that I can't test or that I can't maintain in Laravel. And if they can't do it, then so be it. But if they can do it, then I want to try to fix it and make it better. If they have some kind of situation where Laravel is really making it hard for them to write quality code, then of course I want to try to fix it. So I always try to kind of steer things to the concrete, because I feel like on Twitter, especially, the discussion can go round and round sort of on abstract ideas. Like, I think we should follow single responsibility principle and just kind of go round and round on that topic, but never actually look at any real code and say, what's better? Is this better or is this other way better? And in terms of actual code and things I can look at and see and maintain. So as long as it kind of stays just in text, and it's always hard to really anyone to agree on anything because we're not actually looking at anything real. We're just talking about ideas or principles or whatever.
Yeah, and I think on the note of the whole facades are bad thing, I saw that tweet. Like, I would love to see somebody show something concrete on where it just doesn't work.
Well, I think people don't think facades are bad. They just get confused. They think it's a static method. And I just had this happen with someone recently where I work. We push Laravel for non-Drupal solutions. So there's Drupal for the CMS and there's Laravel for the other things. And but he was just confused by that. But once I showed him through that, he really was happy with the results of Laravel. The other app, we use Silex, but that was, again, just the place I'm in. We're trying these 3 solutions, and Silex is one of the options for the rare cases. But he was really happy with Laravel in the end, and he really, once he got through that, he just saw it. Oh, it's not a static method, and therefore it wiped that from his head. Like, that wasn't a bad design. So
yeah, the only thing I can think of them that is a genuine criticism of them maybe is that they are coupled to Laravel. So if you have a application where you're genuinely want to be framework independent for whatever reason, which I feel like is pretty rare, but then that would be one thing.
They're not coupled to Laravel as much as the dependency injection system.
Yeah, they're more coupled to the dependency injection container. So I mean, in theory, you could use them outside of Laravel. It would just be, you'd have to wire that up a little bit. But I mean, I just feel like it's a little silly to think that someone wrote a bad structured program in Laravel that they would automatically write a very well structured program in another tool. Like, to me, like, if you people write bad code in everything, basically, in every environment I've ever been in, whether that's .NET or PHP or anything, I've seen terrible code written. I mean, most code is actually not that great. So
I think that was one of the best points you made in that discussion is, bad developers are going to write bad code. Doesn't matter what framework or what tools they're using. And if anything, Laravel helps. I know the experience I've had with Laravel, and especially when I'm bringing on new developers, and this holds true with a lot of frameworks. Obviously, Laravel is the one we focus on, but by leveraging Laravel and by having resources like LaraCast and having those practices in place, these new developers who come in and are learning PHP and learning to code start to do so with a more structured approach. Like, you can't use Laravel and not understand object-oriented programming, but you can still do straight PHP and still just do procedural coding all day long. So, it's bad coders are going to write bad code. There's just nothing you can do about it.
So one thing I really want to, I guess, point out again with what you said there, Taylor, with regard to these arguments of bad practices, and where you mentioned that if somebody can show you where it was bad or where you could do better, that you would rewrite it the better way. I feel like that may not get enough notice at times where if somebody can, I think that actually deserves a lot of credit for someone who's a framework founder, to be saying, look, if you can show me how to do it better, I would love to learn. So I think that deserves a lot of credit and a lot of attention that I think a lot of people may not look at. They may just call out, it's bad, and walk away, instead of say, this is, and have that discussion where both of you guys or girls and whoever can learn from it. Yeah. So let's move off of this particular question. I'll ask the next question I have. I know Alfred has some questions, so I'll let him ask right after this one. I'm curious if, as the main guy in Laravel, I know you have Mohammed and you're talking about hiring some other people, but as the main guy, have you ever learned something in the code that you didn't realize was possible? Somebody using your code, your framework in a way that made you go, oh, wow, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I know I've seen that several times. I wish I could think of an example, but maybe every 4 or 5 months I see something like that and I'm like, wow, okay, I never thought of that use case when I built that. But it does happen. I mean, people figure out interesting ways to use different features. But I can't really think of one off the top of my head. It does happen. I wouldn't say it happens very often, but it has happened in the past. Have you seen any real interesting use cases or anything recently?
I realize I asked that question, but I probably should have prepared a bit more and actually thought
Good
about.
Good job, Taylor. Way to call him to the mat.
I know I have seen it.
You
before.
mentioned Adam Watham's use of collections one time, just saying he did some things. You're like, huh,
Yeah, well, yeah, he uses collections. I mean, he can push collections. He almost takes it as like a personal challenge to like any given situation can be solved with collections. So like
I
it's
can
always
solve that in 3 collections.
It's always pretty interesting because he knows about more collection methods than I do, really, or like he knows about more unique ways to use collections. When I use collections, I'm almost always just using like map or first, or maybe like filter, just kind of like the basic stuff. But he'll do some of the stuff with like transpose, zip, and other stuff.
Well, after watching his videos, I'm like, why am I always using map? I can't get beyond.
I know. Well, I use map. It feels like I use map about 90% of the time.
All right, Sean, my turn.
Yeah, you're up. All the pressure is on you.
Here's all the big ones. So you're doing a lot recently with PHP Unit and Selenium, and I really think it's cool. I like how PHP Unit, how fast it is, and all the stuff you've done to integrate it to Laravel. What made you go all the way with Selenium and JavaScript over like Behat? What pushed that direction?
I feel like a lot of it is not so much a conscious decision as much as it is like sometimes I just kind of start down this path of hacking on something, and by the time you figure out it's something viable, you're kind of too far in to like totally scrap it or whatever. So like with Dusk, which is something I was been preparing for Laravel 5.4, where it has the it works with Selenium and stuff. I originally started writing it on top of Nightwatch.js, so it was going to be kind of pure JavaScript. And as I kind of got more into it, I found that Nightwatch was kind of like dated in some ways. Like you couldn't use the new JavaScript syntax or like even like JavaScript classes or something like that because it's just not set up to work with that kind of stuff. And I was kind of I was running into more and more kind of issues. So that's when I scrapped it. And I was just more familiar with PHP Unit and the WebDriver stuff because Jeffrey had used it in his old integrated package, which used to be a package for Laravel to do Selenium testing, which kind of inspired the browser kit testing in Laravel, I guess like 5.1 and 5.2 and that stuff. So then I just started hacking on it, and once, I mean, I don't really know much about Behat, so it probably would have taken me a lot longer to figure out because I've never used it. But I just started doing it with PHP Unit, and it felt pretty good. And especially once I got the figured out how to really make the standalone Chrome driver work really well, I feel like was pretty key, since I didn't really want people to have to be forced to install like JavaScript development kit, be forced to like start up Selenium manually every time. That all felt like really janky. So I just started feeling good, and that was what I knew. So
that makes sense. That's pretty amazing. You went that other route at first, though.
yeah, I mean, I got really far into other route. Like I spent like maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks, like full time hacking on that. So like almost 80 hours probably into that, and it just like wasn't. I don't know. It just didn't feel right at the end of that time. So I was like, this is just not going to work. But I did take a lot of ideas from Nightwatch. I mean, some and kind of bring them into Dusk. That's why it's called Dusk, because it was inspired by Nightwatch.
What, like, just a side question, like you spent 80 hours in that. Was that work hours, like, or was that after hours?
No, just work hours. That's the nice thing really that's the best thing about working full time on Laravel, is because like before, say I was like still working a day job and then working on this in my free time, like that 80 hours would have been over the course of like a couple months, and that would have been like super depressing to waste 2 months of side project time and have to throw it away. But since now 80 hours is only a couple weeks, like it's a lot less risk for me to like experiment with that kind of thing. And even if I have to throw it out, like it's not just like debilitating to do it.
But you have to time box yourself to some degree, right? Because you're thinking of hiring other people, you're running a business. Like how do you like know when enough is enough, or the risk is worth it?
I don't know. I didn't really have any kind of metric for that, but it was just kind of like after a couple of weeks, it just felt like I need to either decide to keep this or scrap it, because I didn't really want to go any further than that. Especially, I mean, lately I've had, Mohammed's been working on a lot of stuff for me. So he upgraded Forge to Laravel 5.3. That saved me a lot of time, obviously. And then the new Forge API he wrote, all by himself. And then the new Forge user interface was written by other people too, and then merged into the 5.3 Forge, which he was working on today, actually, all by Mohammed as well. So like that's freeing me up a lot. Like lately, I've been working on Laravel almost exclusively, and not working on any of my Forge stuff, because he's been doing a pretty good job with that.
So you mentioned 5.4. What's the schedule looking like for that? It's kind of due come out this month, or?
Yeah, it's kind of due. Hopefully it makes it out. I feel like 5.4 is like, I feel the least pressured with this release than I have in a while, because I feel like 5.3 still feels pretty new to me. And I don't know. I just feel like I don't feel super rushed to get anything out, just because I think Laravel's in a pretty good spot right now. And
it definitely seemed like you hit a stride with 5 and 5.1, where it had gotten really dialed in, and you're making some great improvements, but nothing earth-shattering.
Yeah.
Where it still feels. I mean, I still have some clients on the LTS, which was 5.1, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and still, even going back and working on those projects, I mean, the framework still feels.
Yeah, it doesn't feel super dated. No.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Envoy's on 5.1, and it still feels pretty modern. But and 5.4 I think I like it. It's an easy upgrade. There's no big there's no like real tricky upgrade paths or anything. It's all pretty straightforward. If you do have to change anything, it's almost always just kind of like a global finer place. And I don't even think there's any super big changes anyway. It feels like it's the easiest upgrade there has been in the last few years, really. And I think it has some really nice features. And lately, over the past couple of weeks, I've just been reading through every file, every component in every file, because it's been a few years since I've done that. And it's something I used to do a lot back in like Laravel 1 or 2. it was a lot easier to read through every file because there was just less components and they were sort of less. A lot of them existed as just kind of like one file, and there was less classes. And as Laravel has grown into more of just like embracing the whole full stack mentality, it takes more time. But over the past few years, just like stuff kind of builds up, over the course of adding features and getting pull requests where there's a few areas that needed to be cleaned up. So I'm really glad that I got a chance to just read through it all. And it makes me a lot more confident in releasing it. And I feel better about it, like as a product, even though most people will never see like the code that I'm cleaning up per se, because it's not really user facing code. It just makes me feel better to know that like those parts feel pretty good and they look good or they're readable. So like some of the bigger areas I feel like got polished up where the validator got cleaned up quite a bit, and some pagination stuff in Eloquent and the query builder got cleaned up quite a bit. And it wasn't really anything that changed the API or added or removed any features. It was just sort of cleaning up the existing code and making it a little easier to follow and stuff.
So when you're doing this refactoring as well, do you consider performance improvements, or is it just pure readability?
Yeah, sometimes. I kind of did the performance stuff a few weeks ago. I ran Laravel through Blackfire, which is at blackfire.io. That's, I guess it's a Sensio Labs product. I mean, Fabian, who is the founder of Sensio Labs, founded Blackfire. But I ran Laravel through that, and with the op cache, the PHP 7.1 or 7.0 and 7.1 op cache configured for production to where it's not checking any timestamps, and it's sort of fully, production ready. And we did find one spot that it wasn't like slow, but it was just called a lot. So there's this function in the dependency injection container called normalize. And the whole purpose of the function is to let you register stuff in the container with a leading slash. So like if I pass container bind and then I use a leading slash on the class name, the normalize function saw that and stripped it off. So that was just a one line function. It was, nothing complicated at all, but it was called like almost 1,000 times per request, because the container is just heavily used in Laravel because every service provider binds stuff into the container. We're always pulling stuff out of the container. It's just the most heavily used part of the whole framework, really. And so I think a whole request with op cache turned on takes about 10 milliseconds. And one of those milliseconds was just spent on the container normalize method. So even though it was only 1 millisecond of total time, it was 10% of the actual whole request, and which was quite a bit for that one small method. So I basically just removed that entirely because it's very after PHP got the : class syntax, you know what I mean, where you can just say class name : class. That never gives you a leading slash, so it felt really strange to like call this function 1,000 times to sort of satisfy this one case of passing a leading slash in a string class name. So that shaved off a millisecond, which again is not very much, but with op cache turned on, even full stack frameworks don't run for very long, and so it was just a kind of a small improvement, but it made a fairly good difference, I guess.
One of the other questions that came up along that same line of questioning was security, and if you have any sort of formal, are you proactively doing anything with security, and do you have any sort of formal way of handling security issues, and have there really even been any security issues that speak of?
Yeah, it seems like there has been a couple over the years. I'm trying to think of one.
Well, the recent one with PHP mailer, right? Affecting.
Yeah, there was a recent, that's a dependency of Laravel. So I got quite a few emails about it, and there wasn't a lot we could do on our end, but we just, they had that security vulnerability in the mail driver of Swift Mailer or mail transport and PHP mailer. In Laravel itself, the biggest security area is probably the encryptor, which is fairly simple actually in terms of implementation. I've had a couple of people look at it that were, kind of security minded. So one person was Anthony Farrar has looked at it in the past, and so had the Scott. I forget his last name. I feel like he has a pretty long last name, but he writes about security in PHP a lot, and he knows a lot about cryptography in general. And he's looked at it, at least, just kind of overviews before. But the encryptor Laravel is pretty solid. It uses message authentication codes to verify that the encryption can't be changed. Once you encrypt something, if you can't really play with that encrypted value and modify the decrypted value because of the way the messages are signed. And then, of course, the authentication. But even the authentication is sort of built on top of, the session security and stuff. And that all relies on the encryptor too. But yeah, people have looked at it over the years. It's not really a part of the framework that changes very often. So if it changed a lot, it would make me more nervous, but it's one of those things that's kind of been written and it just kind of stays the same for the past 2 or 3 years. The biggest change as far as security and encryption over the past couple of years was moving from encrypt to OpenSSL, because encrypt was deprecated on PHP 7.1. So it is no longer really included with PHP, or throws deprecation warnings, I guess.
And you mentioned the name Scott. The fellow's last name, is it Paragoni?
Yeah, that's the name of his company, I think. I don't know if that's his last name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but he knows a lot about security, actually, and someone I've messaged in the past about it. We haven't had any extensive discussions about security, but he's just someone I've pinged and asked to look over things before.
Do you guys have any questions? I know that Matt's been pretty quiet. I'm going to put the light on him and try and contribute to this adult conversation. Matt?
Earn your paycheck, boy.
See, you guys go at such a speed. It's like, oh, I gotta. Oh no. Oh no. Okay. I'll throw it in there sometime. No, actually, one thing I was gonna say or talk about was with the 5.4. So the second that I saw the upgrade guide come out, I was digging through that right away, and I mean, like, it took 2 seconds to read that snippet because I was extremely excited to hear that. Given the fact that I've got my own packages that I've been maintaining, knowing that the upgrade guide is going to be it's really short and sweet, it's like a huge weight was just lifted off my shoulders when I read that. I was like, thank the universe. Like,
yeah, I haven't finished the upgrade for a guide totally yet, but I was even thinking of Spark today, because of course we'll have to update Spark for 5.4, and I was having trouble even thinking of anything that we were going to have to do actually. Yeah. I don't really know if there is anything we're going to have to do on Spark. I'll have to look again, but yeah, I mean, most of the stuff is pretty minor. So
yeah, like Laravel News had a handful of features that they've listed out, and I was like, oh, okay. So based on those, though, there shouldn't be anything that's really standing out. I mean, like, yeah, you could make efficiency improvements and stuff like that, or like, code cleanup, but it's not really breaking.
Yeah,
right?
Most of the stuff in 5.4 was sort of just building on top of what's already there, like the markdown mail thing. It doesn't really change anything about mail. It just adds on this new option to write your emails in markdown or whatever. In the same way with Dusk, I feel like actually probably the most changes are probably to the unit testing stuff, which I've already put out a package for backwards compatibility. If you don't want to hop on the new unit testing syntax right off the bat, you can pull in this package. It's out there under Laravel/BrowserKit testing, and it gives you literally the exact same syntax that you had in 5.3. So if that's not really something you want to tackle, you can just pull that in and keep running your tests as you were. But I feel like that actually most of the changes were in the unit testing stuff, and with that package in place, makes it real easy to upgrade, and sort of you can change over your tests when you want to, but still take advantage of the new features in 5.4.
With the unit testing, are you 100% like Chrome? Like, I know
it works with any. I mean, that's what comes out of sort of configured out of the box, but it works with any anything that can talk to Selenium. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it.
But you're shooting all the moments where you're interacting with the view. you're shooting those all into Selenium, basically.
Yeah, there you can still do some things. I mean, of course, you can still, of course, make requests and assert on the response status, and you can assert on the headers and cookies and all that. But anything in terms of like, you know, in 5.3, you could say like, click this button or type this into this form. All of that is in Dusk, unless you pull in the browser kit.
But you still got good speeds, though. That's great.
Yeah, I thought. I mean, obviously, it's not as fast as browser kit, but it's actually pretty fast, especially the standalone Chrome driver, which doesn't fire up Selenium at all. That's really fast, and then it's even faster than like Phantom JS in my tests, at least on my machine. But I tested it out with Firefox and even Sauce Labs, where it runs all your tests in the cloud and stuff. It works with both of those, but yeah, out of the box, it's actually pretty fast. I mean, all things considered, it's not as fast as just pure unit test, of course, but it's still, I mean, pretty speedy, I guess. And it has helpers too. So you can say in Dusk, you know, you can say like login as and give it a user, and you don't really have to walk through your login screen and all that. Pretty common stuff like that. And then Dusk also has page objects, which are sort of inspired by Nightwatch.js, where you can write. Sort of hard to explain without showing code, but you can write like shortcuts for your selectors. So like, say you have a search box on your page, and it has some weird CSS selector. You can define a page object in your Dusk test folder called, I don't know whatever page.php, and define a selector for that for search box. And then in your test, you can just say @search box and type into that field. So you don't have to duplicate CSS selectors sort of all over your test. You can you can use like sort of more expressive names. And it's the same way with methods. Like say you have a when I was building Dusk, I actually went and looked at the acceptance test for that Spotify. It's kind of like a Spotify clone in Laravel. I don't know if you've seen it. It starts with a K. Let me look up the name of it.
That's a good idea though, because you could change the CSS change wouldn't affect all your code. It just affects that one.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's called Coel, Koel, on GitHub, but it's sort of an open source personal music streaming server. But they actually have a whole suite of end-to-end tests, and I actually went and looked at all their tests. They don't really know this until now, but I read through a lot of their tests to see, you know, like how would Dusk solve this problem for them. And so they had quite a few flows where they're doing a few things in sequence. So like they would say like select all songs and press the volume or play button or whatever. And they were doing it a lot of the times through CSS selectors like that. And so page objects in Dusk let you give expressive names, not only to selectors, but also to sort of like processes. So I could say like, I could define a method on a page object called like maximize volume. And maybe that clicks and drags some volume slider on the page, so that in my test, I can just say, you know, visit this page, maximize volume, click this or whatever. And it all reads a lot more expressively than having to do all of the CSS selector and like page interaction right there in the test. So that's something that I haven't really seen that in like Codeception, but it was something that was in Nightwatch that I thought was pretty cool actually. So I really wanted to bring that over into Dusk, so I thought it was really helpful. But yeah, anyway, their end-to-end tests were pretty helpful in letting me say like, okay, I can see that this is a good opportunity to make this better or whatever, and sort of give me a real-world app to go off of.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the 5.4 upgrade is going to be pretty smooth, but 5.5 is going to sound like it's going to require a little bit more lifting there.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your server setup, since it requires PHP 7. And a lot of the reason it requires PHP 7 is just sort of external influences, where, you know, PHP Unit in February is going PHP 7 only with their PHP Unit 6 release. And then, of course, Symfony itself in November with Symfony, I guess it's Symfony 4.0, is going to be PHP 7 only. So we'll definitely have to be PHP 7 by then, because we use a handful of their components like the console and HTTP Foundation and stuff. So we really have pretty much no choice but to go PHP 7 only in July or whenever this summer sometime.
So it's not particularly, the driving factor behind that is not really particularly anything you want to do with the framework, more along the lines of the dependencies?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I didn't really care about going PHP 7 if we it wasn't going to drastically change the way I write Laravel. So that's fine. I'm glad that we'll go on PHP 7 and have the option to use things when we need them. I mean, to me, one of my favorite PHP 7 features is the little double question mark thing. So you don't have to do is set, the ternary expression for the is set and stuff. But I'm not a super big type hints person. So to me, PHP 7 was fine. Like, it wasn't like world changing or revolutionary to me, but yeah, with the external packages moving to PHP 7, we really have no choice.
So, and that was actually one of the topics we wanted to talk about more in general. I mean, anybody can feel free to speak up, but I mean, Taylor, you have a pretty large environment that you're managing now. We all have environments we're managing, and trying to stay current with, Laravel, the packages we include in our Laravel applications, our servers, Nginx. I mean, do you yourself have any sort of personal philosophy on the way you try to stay current with all this stuff? Obviously there's a strong push to get people to PHP 7 with PHP 5 kind of falling off the support chart. And I mean, what do you do? What practices do you do to try to stay current with all that?
Gosh, I don't know. Just kind of hang on for dear life, I guess. I mean,
okay, so I'm doing it right then. Great.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know. It's overwhelming at times. I mean, especially like in the, I'm just kind of got lucky. I've got some good people around me, like Jeffrey Way, who he's been maintaining, Elixir and stuff, because keeping current with that whole JavaScript ecosystem is really hard in itself. And so that's just one less thing I have to worry about, thankfully. He just sort of gives me Elixir or Laravel Mix, as it's called, in 5.4, so we're not conflicting with the programming language Elixir anymore. And then just also being able to ask questions of people that, like Chris Fidal on the server side, with like Nginx and stuff like that. We used to work together at Userscape, and he maintains server for hackers now, but he's pretty knowledgeable about lots of different server stuff. He's done a lot of different server stuff at Userscape and just in his own, research and stuff. But it's hard. I mean, like, there's still, sort of trends that I'm not very current on right now. Like, I don't know hardly anything about Docker at all.
I just started watching Chris's videos in Docker. He's really
yeah,
good.
I need to watch those, because I'm really far behind on that. And I feel really lucky that Vue.js came out, because I don't think I would have ever learned modern JavaScript if it wasn't like something like that, because it was just super approachable for me and easy to digest, because it's just hard to stay on top of all that stuff, really.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys, there's this great quarterly, it's from ThoughtWorks, it's called Radar. And every quarter they put out like research on techniques, tools, platforms, and frameworks. And one of them is a canary build. And basically every night you have your CI run your application running updates on Composer, so that you can then run all your tests to see if the builds break it. And the point is, like, I could have fixed SwiftMailer by running that ahead of time, because I would have just been ahead of everything. It's a really nice idea. I'm going to start trying, because it's pretty cool. It's one thing you're scared of doing, but if you're just doing it every night anyways and running your tests, you might not have to think. But that,
I think that's a key aspect of anything with any of these upgrade paths. If you're a PHP developer, if you have good tests, no matter where in the stack you're doing an upgrade, you feel a lot more confident if your tests are passing. And so I think when you come to address any sort of upgrade path, you can always fall back to, well, where are your tests? Do you have tests in place? And if you do, that just happens a lot easier.
Gosh, the tests in Laravel were so valuable over the past few weeks as I've been refactoring a bunch of stuff, which I feel like is really where tests shine. A lot of times is when you're just kind of improving code. And there were so many situations where I just made kind of one small mistake, but the tests caught it, and saved me some time. And then there was a couple situations where one in particular was I was refactoring how the schema builder renames columns, and I refactored it all out into like this separate class because it was pretty convoluted to keep in one class, because renaming columns is a lot harder than it sounds actually on SQLite especially. So I refactored it all out and got it all separated, ran the test, and they all passed the first time. And I was like, that seems a little, too good to be true, actually, based on how much I had done. And so then I commented it out, the whole class, and they still passed. And I was like, we obviously don't have any tests on this entire part of the framework, because I can comment out the whole feature and it's still passing. And so that I pinged Muhammad and was like, hey, tomorrow morning, can you add some tests for this feature? Because no matter what I do, they're still passing. So having the test was really valuable. And it also let me quickly see where we didn't have tests, because usually when I refactor something, I would like go into the method I'm refactoring, and just at the top of it, I would put like return some random string and just break it on purpose to see if the tests were breaking, just to show me like, do I actually have good tests on this method, or are they like kind of brittle, so yeah.
When you do that, you don't run all your tests, you just run the test around that particular class?
I was just running them all. I mean, they only take
how long they take?
Yeah, it just takes 1.5 seconds at least on the iMac. On my 2015 MacBook, it took 4 seconds. But those are all, pure PHP unit tests. There's no there's no integration test or anything.
That's nice.
The one thing I've always found to be probably the fishiest thing about tests when you're doing refactoring is it's kind of like what you were saying there, where you feel like there's something that should be broken given how much you've changed.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there, but you'll run the test and it's like everything's fine. And even if you put little fail points in to mark like, oh yeah, no, this isn't getting tested, it still just feels weird, right? Like it's an eerie feeling that it's like, oh, it was that easy.
Yeah. And that's one thing I would like to do for Laravel 5.5 actually, is clean up a bunch of the tests, because tests are even more neglected than code, a lot of times, and they just sort of build up duplication and cruft, and sort of, you just kind of copy. If you want to write a test that's kind of similar to another test, you just kind of copy and paste it and change a couple things, and you sort of build up quite a bit of cruft around tests. So I told Muhammad one thing I'd like to do is, improve those quite a bit for 5.5, and especially like with Eloquent. Some of our tests, I feel like, I don't want to say they're useless, but they're just sort of silly. Like we'll, either comparing like some of the generated SQL instead of just like hitting a test database and seeing if it works. Stuff like that, because our test against the generated SQL, we could have the SQL syntax wrong in our expectation, and it's actually broken on a real database, but our tests are still passing. So over the past year, we actually did add quite a few Eloquent integration tests to where all the relationships run through an actual SQLite in-memory database, at least, just as a sanity check to say like, hey, is this actually working in the real world? Or, even though our generated SQL looks correct, can we actually do it on a database?
The one thing I wanted to point out with regard to, we asked you about how do you stay current, and you were talking about having Jeffrey Way take time off your plate, and having Mohammed, and I know you work closely with Adam Watson from time to time, and you've got your core group of people who you always talk with to get information. And other guys here, Matt, Eric, and Alfred, I kind of bug them almost every single day with questions on the LaraChat Slack. Same thing with Chris on the DevOps side of things. And been really, I guess, pumping the tires of Slack and LaraChat is been able to build up a network of knowledgeable people and friends who, if I have a question, I'll just go and ask them, and they usually have an answer, and vice versa. And I think that's one thing I'm really enjoying about the Slack community, or any any communities. There's a lot of Slack communities, and I mean, we can go on ICQ or not ICQ, IRC as well. And you could, like for anybody watching, like I highly suggest build up a network of good people around you to help support your personal development, and you can help support them. Really wanted to call that out as a really important thing for new developers and old developers.
Sean, did you get my invoice yet?
No, new phone. Who's this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So you do some things with command line stuff, Envoy, Spark, Laravel installer, right? So you're taking PHP and you're making FAR files, right? Do you have any tricks to that? Frameworks you use, starting points, testing processes?
I used to build FAR files. I don't always do that. I don't think we have any anymore.
Okay.
Right. Lately, we use just Composer Global Install. Back when I was doing FAR files for the installer and stuff, we would use this package called Box, which you may have seen, which is used to generate FAR files. But I always found the FAR files are just they're hard for me to grasp how they're actually built and work. And it was always a little confusing.
Yeah.
So we moved to doing with the Laravel installer and the Spark installer, just either Composer Global install it, using Composer Global require, I think is the command, or just clone it down into some directory and put that in your path, because that always felt simpler than just doing the FAR files. But one major key I will mention, I think I've mentioned on Twitter a couple times, is there is this package, if you're doing Composer Global install, that you should definitely install. It's actually a Composer plugin called consolidation/CGR on GitHub. And what it does is it's basically a total replacement for Composer Global Require. And it lets every globally installed package have its own set of dependencies. Because if you use Composer Global Require a lot, one thing you'll run into is if you install one package, say the Laravel installer, and it depends on Symfony Console 3.1 or something, let's say, and then you install some other package, widget/sprocket package or whatever, some make-believe package, and it depends on Symfony Console 2.7, you won't be able to have them installed at the same time, which always I thought was really weird, because I just wanted them each to be totally separate things. I want this command line tool and this other command line tool, and the fact that they have conflicting dependencies shouldn't matter, because I just want to install them as two separate things. So this consolidation CGR plugin actually makes Composer behave that way, to where every globally installed package has its own dependency folder with its own dependency requirements.
Yeah.
So honestly, that's one of the first things I installed on my new Mac when I got it, was that package, because when I install the Laravel installer, when I install Envoy, which I use a lot, I needed that in place. But yeah, I haven't done FAR files in a while. I just find the Composer installs just a little simpler. Everyone already has Composer anyway, so.
No, it's interesting. Okay, that's good to hear. And would you use Laravel as your foundation? I mean, it's so nice. You have, nice facades to do syntax with. You have a lot of stuff ready to go. Like, why would you not, or why would you, like,
for like a command line tool, you mean?
Yeah, like, so let's take Envoy, for example. Like, why would you not use it for that,
Yeah, I usually do pull in at least Illuminate support, and a lot of times Illuminate container, it feels like. If I'm like for Valet, we pulled in Illuminate support, but for the console piece, we used it's kind of got a funny name. It's called, let me see. It's actually called Silly, SILLY.
Okay, so no pun intended. Yeah.
But
why would you use that over Artisan? Like, why did you just not pull in Laravel at that point?
It's just, I don't know. It's just real fast, and it's just kind of one of those things where like you get started and it works, and it's based on Symfony Console, so it all kind of looks like Artisan anyway.
Okay.
But it's kind of unique in the sense that you register everything in one file, kind of like a routes file. So if you go look at the Valet source code, like we make a new console application and we just call app command and give it the command like name, and then give it a closure. So it basically looks like a route file, and all the commands are just in one file. So I actually really like that package for writing little command line tools because it's really simple to write them, and you don't even have to write command classes.
Did it inspire some of the work you did recently with Artisan?
Yeah, Laravel. Whenever that Laravel console signature stuff came out, I can't remember if that was 5.2 or 5.3, but where you can specify all the command arguments just as a string, where you have like the command name and then the curly braces and then the argument name and stuff like that, instead of having to make that array of input arguments and input options. That was inspired by the Silly package. Yeah,
that was 5.3, I think.
Okay, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, because I think that's where I was like, oh my God, that's so much better.
Oh yeah, it's a lot better.
Package update galore.
Yeah, it's a lot better. I've still, there's still commands in Laravel that use the old way, and I've been migrating them kind of as I come across them. But the queue work command and the queue listen command, we're still using the old way of specifying arguments, and I moved all that over to the new way, which is a lot cleaner, easier to read.
Yeah, the last command line apps I've written that I actually put out as like global composer packages, they were all just with the Symfony console, like just simple like that. But then, that thing can be awfully convoluted just in terms of even set up for a simple command line app, right?
Yeah, it kind of can be. That's why I kind of like Silly, since it's still based on Symfony console, which at the end of the day is pretty nice, but just like the user experience is a lot better.
Right, especially when you're doing something that's kind of clean and simple. You just want to be able to push it out, and you're not trying to deal with something that's going to scale, exponentially per se.
Yeah. Symfony console is definitely nice. I mean, I've looked for equivalents to Symfony console, like in other programming languages, and it's actually pretty good. I mean, I haven't really found anything else as like thorough and thought out as like a baseline as Symfony console.
Is Fabian human? I mean, I'm trying to figure this out. Is he?
Yeah, he's got a lot of stuff out there. I mean, a lot of stuff that honestly I would not want to write. Like, I mean,
yeah. I met him in real life, so he could have been like AI or Westworld.
Yeah.
But yeah, he does take on the dirty work.
Yeah, I mean, quite a bit of dirty work. I mean, maintaining SwiftMailer, maintaining Twig, those are pretty big projects.
The one thing I wanted to call out is we're almost up at the end of the show. We've got about 7 minutes left for the full hour. Don't want to have to keep everybody too much later. Definitely getting pretty late in the Eastern time zone. But we had some community questions, and one of them was, let me pull it up here. With regards to Taylor, your GitHub profile, someone in LaraChat asked about your GitHub profile that you send commits almost every day, and he was curious how you balance your personal work and life, your work-life balance.
Wait, we have to ask his wife this. This is not fair.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. Like on the weekends, usually if the kids are taking naps, I'll commit a few things like in that hour or two period. But I actually was looking at the other day and let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I missed 9 days in 2016 of commits, but usually on the weekends, like it will just be something. I'm usually just trying to trim down the pull requests for Monday morning because that Monday morning is usually the craziest. So like I'll try to come in on like a Sunday or a Saturday for an hour and just sort of get the pull request under control at least, so that Monday morning and there's not like 50 pull requests out there on GitHub, because then it takes, until noon before I can even actually do any real work usually. So I just have to stay on top of pull requests, especially and emails to customers, since they're like paying for a product at least a little bit every day. And sometimes I can do it, at night in bed, just on I keep a little 12-inch MacBook downstairs and can knock out a few things on that, just in bed, since it's nice and portable. So
one thing I wanted to call out was this came out today, or at least I came across it today. Reflect.io has a GitHub report card. I'm curious to see what your guys' report cards are for GitHub. I guess it goes through and builds some kind of what are they called? The infographic of your GitHub commits and history.
Oh yeah, what's it? Where is it? What's the URL?
I just it GitHub report card, all one word, dot reflect, like reflection, dot io.
Well, they have
I'll tweet
another
it.
one that used to do
Yeah,
music
that's
too.
it.
They're currently stating that we're experiencing unusually high traffic. So
That looks awesome.
That's funny.
I dare you to tweet out the results
I will.
after the show.
I will go blatantly out there and be like, look at that.
What was your results?
I don't know yet. I'm waiting,
Yeah.
but I want to know.
We could just
It's like,
sit here in silence until the email comes. How about that?
Taylor, have you ever used a Scrutinizer before?
Yeah, I have used that before. I've used a couple tools like that, Scrutinizer and what's the other one? Maybe Code. It wasn't CodeShip. It was something else.
The one thing I've always found about Scrutinizer is that I love it because it highlights all those things that you miss, but it's also the most like blatantly truthful of your shortcomings. And
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
like like a report card, you can pad that all you want, but when you look at those ratings or whatnot, and it's like, yeah, your code is like 80%, you're like, oh, I failed.
Yeah. I've used Code Climate was the other one I was trying to think of, which I liked quite a bit too. Yeah, I haven't. I looked at those a couple of years ago, but haven't looked at them a lot since. Is some of the things are hard, like in a framework context, to sort of quantify because sometimes frameworks I feel like do, or at least I do certain things differently in a framework than I might in my own app. So like with the validator stuff, I didn't really want to go all out and make a class for every rule in the validator because it's a lot of file IO to do that kind of thing. And so I'll get dinged on that, like on Scrutinizer as like this class is too large, where it's like I don't really want to split it up though, because I want to keep the framework overhead as minimal as I can at least and not have to include, 50 files just to validate something in your app. So it's always sort of a balancing act at the framework level between breaking things up and keeping your classes really small versus having a lot of disk IO and requiring a lot of classes out of the box. And that's becoming less of a problem, or I feel more comfortable making more classes now, especially in PHP 7 because of everything being op cached. And like the difference, for instance, in 5.4, we actually removed the optimize. We didn't remove the artisan command because I didn't want it to break people's deployments if they still have that command, but it doesn't actually compile all the classes into one big file anymore because there's no difference in their performance when you're op caching everything between compiling it all into one file or just leaving them all in separate files. So thankfully it's getting to where you don't have to really sacrifice that anymore for performance.
But it's in with the framework, like you're saying, it's so much more readable when you can poke around the code more and not like, where did this come from? And you're like,
you have to go through like 5 layers of weirdness.
So Taylor, I mean, I know we're coming up in the hour, and Sean wants to wrap this up real fast. But I definitely want to give you an opportunity because I'm sure ticket sales are struggling this year with all the controversy around the fact that Laracon wasn't in San Diego. We can talk about that. But how are the ticket sales going for Laracon this year? Are you looking forward to it as much as you can, being in New York and not in San Diego, which would have been probably better for everybody involved?
San Diego actually was an awesome location, and it's always kind of a bummer because I looked at San Diego and San Francisco this year, and it's just hard to get people to to get venues to respond to you and stuff. It sounds weird, but it's just hard. Like I was so close to nailing down a venue in San Francisco, and like I talked to them on the phone, and then they just stopped answering my emails, stopped returning phone calls and stuff like that. And so then you feel like really pressure. It's like, okay, I have to have a venue for this conference pretty soon. And so it just so happened that New York's, of course, it's strategically makes sense to have it in New York since there's 10 million people, in the immediate area. But then also just the venues were pretty responsive. So, and it was just coming time to actually figure something out, because it was getting close to December, I think, before it was definitely into November before I really had a venue nailed down. And but ticket sales are going good. I've sold, I think we're up to 280 sold, and I can only sell about 460 this year because of the venue's about 50 people smaller than last year.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that, because I just made the assumption. You and I were talking when you were looking in San Diego, and I just had made the assumption that you were looking to go bigger. But you decided to keep it pretty small, huh?
Yeah,
I mean, not small. 400 people is not small.
Yeah, I mean, the theater holds about 500 people. I just have to leave room for speakers and sponsors. So I have to leave about 30 empty or whatever. And then I also just wanted people to be able to have comfortable seating. So like it's a lot like the Louisville venue, where it has, you know, the theater seating and nice seats, and it has a nice lobby, where I wanted us to be able to have sort of the reception after party at the venue, so we didn't have to all, especially in New York, have to all get cabs to go to some other place across town or whatever, which could take a while. And it was just sort of finding the right combination of comfortable seating, good audio, video, good lobby, that can be hard to find. And like, if I could have found a 600 person or 700 person venue in New York quickly and affordably with those things, then I would have gone bigger. But I would rather have a nice venue and be about the same size than have to kind of sacrifice everything and have people sit in folding chairs and junk like that. So I just like to try to keep it nice overall.
You didn't mention Wi-Fi. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, so this place actually, they have Wi-Fi, but then you can also pay extra for like, which I'll probably do, for, you know, sort of a better Wi-Fi system they bring in through some outside vendor, I guess. So I'll probably pay for that, because I don't think it was very expensive, actually. It's only $500 or $600, which in the scheme of things is not very expensive. So that will be pretty important, having so many programmers in there, especially.
The one thing is, Eric, it sounds like you do have a little bit of enforcing to do to some of these San Diego and San Francisco venues. You've got to go and give them a little bit of a talking to. Fly me down. I'll bring some of my hockey fighting skills with me. I'll bring a hockey stick. We'll go talk to these people.
I'm gonna have to go visit a few people, talk to them, see what's going on. I'm a little disappointed. Taylor, you give me some names, and we'll figure something out here.
Yeah, we'll take care of that.
Yeah.
But also, I also wanted to mention, like, I don't know how many of us are going to be going to Laracon. We're still trying to figure it out. I know some of the other guys here have their ticket, but if we can all go, I think we would like to do a show at the venue. So having the Wi-Fi would be really important. So we'll figure out whether we can do that or not.
All our viewers will be there in person, so
all four of them, yeah. And real quick, I did want to send out a couple props to Taylor. Again, as I mentioned last year at Laracon, he called out LaraChat Slack channel, talked about what a great community it was. When he was talking about potentially going to San Francisco or San Diego for Laracon, he was taking consideration the community. So it's nice to get that acknowledgement that, you know, community is definitely something he's considering. You're considering, Taylor, not like you're not sitting here. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Maybe next year we'll be able to swing it out to the West Coast. I feel like the weather, of course, would be nice. And I was actually pretty pumped about San Diego, because it's just such a cool looking city, and it has, you know, the water was real close to the venues we were looking at and stuff. But that would be really nice. So hopefully I'll have to start early. You know, like I start early, but it's never early enough, it seems like. I think I started planning this one it was in September or so, or in October. And I mean, Laracon EU, I just gotten home from at the end of August. And then the very next month I started planning, you know, the next Laracon US. So you have to start really early, because the venues just fill up really fast, especially out in those bigger cities in the West Coast and stuff. And with San Diego, the week of Laracon US was either the week before or the week after Comic-Con, which was throwing a wrench in a lot of venue things too.
Yeah, you can't touch San Diego during Comic-Con, man.
Yeah.
It's just not an option.
Which I thought it would have been cool if Laracon wasn't at the same time as Comic-Con, but was, you know, up against it, so that when Laracon ended, people could, if they wanted to stay an extra few days, they could go to Comic-Con. That would have been cool, but
That'd be awesome.
yeah, it didn't work out that way.
How many people would be caught, or maybe let me rephrase it. If you did that, if you were able to pull that off in the future, are people allowed to cosplay at Laracon?
I guess so, yeah. We never had a rule about that before.
I go every year as a web developer.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
So basically what Eric's trying to say is he goes every year as a bum. So I'm going to end the show with this. We've gone 6 minutes over. I would like to thank all of you guys for coming on, especially Taylor for sitting through our questions. And
thank you.
Sorry?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
thanks a lot, man.
But yeah, it's been great. And with regards to what we want to be doing with LaraChat Live, is we've got some future guests. I'll let Eric speak to that.
As I say, before we let this go, we got a couple of things we need to do real fast. First thing, we did select our 5 winners for the GitHub giveaway. We'll be DMing you on Twitter probably tonight or tomorrow. We do have a new hashtag for January, and that hashtag is Sean. What's the hashtag?
We picked a hashtag.
It was something new LaraChat New Year or something. What was it? Come on! You had one job.
I'll tweet it out. It's gone for me right now. Sorry,
we'll tweet out the new hashtag for this month. Again, retweet it, and we'll add you to entry. We're going to give away another 5 GitHub accounts this month. So the winners for December will DM you, or we'll get in touch with you over Twitter somehow, and keep an eye out for the new hashtag for this month. In 2 weeks, we will have Jeffrey Way on the show, which we're looking forward to that as well. So be sure to join in for that also. So Jeffrey Way will be here. What's that? The 19th? That sounds right? Maybe. Yes, the 19th will be Jeffrey Way. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah, I like how you got the bat cape in the background there.
So I got Batman all over this joint. I just got these little guys in today.
Nice. Okay. All right, guys. We should call it, or else we'll never get off here. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you for the questions, and we'll catch you next time, as Eric said. Have a good time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.